The inflation problem is worldwide. And it's because all these central banks made the same mistake. And unfortunately, they were pretty much following the Fed's lead. I think that the free market is going to reject the dollar and other currencies because they're a flawed form of money, because they are no longer a store of value. Because all these Bitcoin guys were like, oh, see, blockchain is the death of gold. No, it's going to lead to the rebirth of gold, because Bitcoin is what we don't need.
In today's video, Peter Schiff, founder, CEO and global strategist of Euro-Pacific Capital, and a prominent Bitcoin critic, warns all investors to be careful about Bitcoin. He believes that Bitcoin price will go down even lower. Peter gives a warning that the 2008 crisis was just the prelude to a larger sovereign debt crisis in the United States that may lead to a collapse of the US dollar. Before listening to him, please ensure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel.
Other businesses, whether it's utilities that are, providing people with power that they need in their lives, or some healthcare companies, medical services, which we all need. Everybody gets sick and everybody wants to get better. And so health is important. And so these healthcare companies are there. Almost an opposite side, though, but is tobacco, because people like to smoke. And so these tobacco companies, if you're addicted to smoking, you're going to smoke. And if the price of cigarettes goes up, well, you're going to keep smoking. And, you'll find a way to pay for it. I mean, those stocks pay good dividends as well. But there's all sorts of companies that service, let's say, the agriculture or the energy sectors, telecommunications. We own quite a few of those. Those stocks have kind of been left for dead for a while. They're pretty cheap, to buy, and they have good dividends. So there's a lot of different stocks that people own. We own some of the beer companies, brewers. People, it's not an expensive drink, but a lot of people drink, and maybe people drink more when times are bad, because that's a cheap way to make yourself feel a little better and escape reality. So we own some of those companies. But, there are a lot of different companies that have real value. And, people have to go somewhere. I think you just can't be in cash, because all these governments are just printing too much money. The inflation problem is worldwide. And it's because all these central banks made the same mistake. And unfortunately, they were pretty much following the Fed's lead. We're the issuer of the reserve currency. And so everybody else kind of, marches to the beat of our drum. And we had interest rates at 1% or 0. And so everybody else had to come down. In fact, some countries went negative because they wanted their rates to be lower than ours. Well, when our rates are 0, how do you get below 0? So they actually went into uncharted territory in the twilight zone of negative rates, as irrational as that is. But that was only because we were at 0. That's why they had to go negative. They wanted to have easy money in relation to a U.S. Well, the U.S., we went to 0. So we kind of corrupted the monetary policy of the entire world. But I think the world is going to reject the dollar. It's already happening. I mean, in fact, with the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia and the example that we've sent to the world, I already think, the Chinese and a lot of other players are just not liking that and really wanting to take away some of America's power. And the source of that power is the reserve status of the dollar. And we lose that, and it's a whole new ballgame here. Because America's ability to live beyond its means is a function of the dollar's reserve status. Because we can print dollars and use those dollars that we print to buy goods and services, mainly goods that we didn't produce. It's kind of like these guys that issue cryptocurrencies out of thin air, right? That FTX token cost Bankman-Fried nothing to create, and he could just issuing them and have this huge value. Well, we do the same thing with the dollar. It cost us nothing. We create them out of thin air, and then everybody assigns a value to them.
Do you think there's a possibility or what do you think the possibilities are for the future of gold to play an official role back in an official monetary role, whether this is oil begins to be priced in gold, or some kind of a cryptocurrency or stable coin is backed by gold?
Yeah. There's no question that gold is going to reemerge as the monetary unit of choice for the world. I mean, it's not an accident that gold was money for 5,000 years. It's been money for so long because it works. But governments, didn't like the gold standard because if they wanted to spend money, they needed the gold. And so they needed to collect it through taxes because they didn't have gold. The private sector had gold. And so if the government wanted gold to pay for some spending program, they had to take it from the people. Well, as much as the people like government programs, they also hate paying taxes. And so governments wanted a way to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to give people government programs, but not give them the bill. Now, one way is like, well, we're going to tax the rich, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to give you all these goodies, but the rich people are going to pay for it, right? Well, eventually, you've taxed the rich to the point that you can't tax them any higher, or they'll, and now you have just the middle class left, and there, they don't want to pay more taxes. So they just print money. We run these huge deficits, and we pay for government with inflation. And that's why we have so much inflation, because we have so much government that we didn't pay for through taxation. So we're paying for it through inflation, which means higher prices. So I think that the free market is going to reject the dollar and other currencies because they're a flawed form of money, because they are no longer a store of value, right? They can still function as a medium of exchange. You can still use them as a unit of account, but if they're not a good store of value, then they're not good as a medium of deferred payment. They're not good for lending and borrowing, because you really have no idea. If I loan you my dollars for 10 years, in a high inflation environment, I have no idea what those dollars might buy me in 10 years. They may buy me nothing. So when the public starts to lose confidence in the value of the dollar, what are they going to use as an alternative? Well, they could use gold. Now, the inconvenience of using gold is, well, I've got a bar of gold, or I got a gold coin. One gold coin, how am I gonna buy things with it? How am I gonna just, exchange it? Now, of course, at one point we did do that. People had gold coins in their pockets, and they had bills in their pockets that were backed by gold. And if they wanted to buy something small, well, they paid in silver, or they paid in nickel, or they paid in copper, right? That's the penny. But today, because of the technology that we have now, that we didn't have in the past when we were using gold as money, because we have the internet, because we have blockchain, we can tokenize the ownership of gold and issue digital currency backed by gold instead of paper currency backed by gold that can circulate as a medium of exchange very efficiently, so that people can make big ticket purchases with gold. I could buy a car and pay in gold, or I could buy a pack of chewing gum and pay in gold, because you can break gold down into a fraction of a gram, and then I can send that fraction of a gram around the world for a fraction of a cent. So it's like, the current technology, and that's the irony, because all these Bitcoin guys were like, oh, see, blockchain is the death of gold. No, it's going to lead to the rebirth of gold, because Bitcoin is what we don't need. Gold is what gives the digital currency its value, because gold actually is the store of value. But with blockchain, it's a better medium of exchange than it had been in the past, because it has all the attributes of Bitcoin, except better, because it's faster and cheaper to transact. But it's also a store of value, which Bitcoin can never be, because Bitcoin has no underlying value that can be stored.
Where's the guarantee that XYZ cryptocurrency is actually backed by gold? It's just in the trust of some auditing committee, correct?
Right, but there was never a guarantee, and it worked for hundreds of years with paper. You have trusted third parties that compete in a free market, and there will be certain tokens that will have a higher degree of trust, and therefore will be more marketable than other tokens. And of course, companies can say our gold is audited. Here's our independent auditors. We have insurance. We've paid, let's say, Lloyd's of London to insure our gold. So even if it gets stolen, Lloyd's has, we've bought an insurance policy. And then, of course, if Lloyd's is insuring the gold, then you have another set of eyes that's going to make sure that it's secure. Otherwise, they won't write the insurance policy. You can store it with a company like Brinks, right? Brinks has been storing precious metals for over 150 years. They've never lost an ounce. That seems like a pretty good track record. So look, trusting third parties is what everybody does in capitalism. I mean, if you have life insurance, you've trusted a third party to pay the claim, when you die. The same thing with fire insurance or auto insurance. All insurance requires a third party to pay in the event that whatever you insured against happens. That doesn't stop people from buying insurance because they have to trust a third party. They just make sure when they buy insurance, they buy it from a third party they can trust. And what do these insurance companies do to preserve that trust? Well, that trust is value. That's their brand. That is their goodwill of their company that they want to preserve. And so it's fine. The idea that says, hey, we can't use gold as money because we need to trust a third party is nonsense. We've always been trusting third parties, and it's worked. The only time it doesn't work is when the third party is a government. That's when they screwed us, because when we trusted the government, like when we trusted the United States government, because the government had the gold and they said, hey, here's our notes, they're backed by gold. What did Nixon do? Nixon devalued twice, although Roosevelt devalued first. He took the gold, the dollar, and said, hey, it was worth, gold was at $20 an ounce, and now it's 35. So now you need $35 to buy an ounce of gold. Before you needed 20. But then Nixon says, well, he devalued it from 35 to like 40 and then 42. But then he said, you know what? I'm defaulting. We're not giving you any gold for your paper. So the U.S. government screwed everybody. The private sector doesn't have a history of doing that. It's government. So that's why I'm saying that I think it's the private sector that is going to lead the world back to a gold standard. Not governments. Governments don't have any vested interest to want to do this, but the public does, right? Just like, did the post office have a vested interest in Federal Express? No, but the free market did. Taxi cabs didn't want Ubers, but now they're here, right? Yeah. Why are they there? Because the government provided, oligopolies, with, these taxi cabs. They were overcharging people. So that was a window. The post office is a monopoly, overcharge people. The government has a monopoly on money. And we're being overcharged through inflation to use government